Hello, my fellow strawmen, and welcome back to the Fields of Hay. This week we're returning to a messenger of truth. In our first episode, he tried and failed to show evidence against atheism. Today, we'll come at the same problem from a new angle and see if he can prove God's existence. He says his proof is good enough to convince any atheist, so I guess that's meant to include me.
Before I give you the proofs for God's existence, we have to recognize two things right off the bat. Number one, Romans 1 tells us that every human already knows God, but they did not glorify him as God or give him thanks, but they became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish heart was darkened. The scriptures teach that God himself has already proven himself to everybody. He is evident within their own hearts, their own minds, and God made it evident to them. The problem is their hearts, they are wicked.
But Romans 1 only means anything to me after I've accepted God's existence, and a particular God at that. This does nothing to help set up any proofs. All it does is demonstrate the messenger cannot think outside the context of his scriptures. Whether through indoctrination or his own intuition, messenger grew up thinking that a God probably exists. Then he read Romans, and the Bible told him that God gave him that feeling that he had, and that everyone has this feeling, and that the feeling is proof of God. And Messenger felt that feeling and convinced himself that it was proof, and that was all he needed to accept the Bible as true. Because now that he accepts it as true, then it's true that the intuition he feels is proof of God. And it's true that everyone knows this proof, and it's true that everyone should accept the Bible as true. And so it's true that the intuition he feels is proof of God. And, well, you get the idea. It's this insidious mixture of presupposition, confirmation bias, and circular reasoning. I'm certain that if I told him it was circular, he'd jump to a presup presentation. And if I called him out on being presup, he'd do a little jig over to the Bible tells us so. But make no mistake, it is a wall he has built around his beliefs to make it impossible to express doubt. It is a poisoning of the well, and before we've even started, a perfect example of how little he intends to have an honest conversation. No, instead he's here to say that anyone who disagrees with him is evil, and that's that.
So the fact is, nobody needs an argument for the existence of God. What people need is to be called out on their sin and called to repentance, so that they believe in the gospel and get saved.
Normally I don't put it into such wording, but that's what I'm here for. I'm here to tell Messenger of Truth of his sin of confusing good news with truth, and to call him to repentance for the lies he spread so that he stops wasting his life chasing after a mistaken Messiah and leading others to falsehoods.
Second thing we have to recognize is that there's a difference between proof and persuasion. I can prove God's existence all day long, but someone who does not want God to exist and wants to live in their sin is not going to accept it.
Twice he poisons the well. This one is more subtle because it can be a valid point. If I give an argument to someone and they aren't of a mindset to even consider what I have to say, then it doesn't matter if I have a good argument. They'll deny it. But I would only say this of someone if they've tried to address my argument and demonstrated that they aren't paying attention. I don't just start by saying, I'm going to prove God's non-existence, and if you disagree with me, then that's because you want God to exist, and you're an evil person who doesn't care about the truth. I think that Messenger has to make this point because he needs to put up these walls that prevent him from having a serious engagement with a non-believer, because deep down he knows that his beliefs don't hold up to scrutiny. What baffles me is why he holds to them regardless. And yes, I did just do the thing of accusing him of living in denial and not caring about truth. He did it as a blanket statement regardless of what my response may be, while I'm doing it specifically in response to his two poisonings of the well, which are good evidence that he doesn't intend to pay attention to my arguments. What a wonderful mindset to be in before we've even started. Really glad we took the time to recognize these two things.
Now, for the atheists, what they want is proof that would persuade them on their own terms. Types of proofs that they themselves would approve.
That's what everyone wants everyone to do.
Seriously, didn't Messenger accept God on his own terms? And if I'm ever going to persuade him of my worldview, won't he require me to persuade him on his own terms? And if there are no terms, which seems to be the case, then wouldn't it be impossible to persuade him, even if his current belief is mired in falsity? And yeah, there's that well water again. Tastes pretty bad, huh?
Now let's talk about the three ways you can prove God's existence with any atheist. These are generally the three ways that they would accept. The first type of proof we can use is rational type proofs, meaning we can reason on our own with our own minds to conclude that God exists.
I'll agree the general concept is valid. Reason can take you a long way, and if it gets you to God, so be it. But we must be wary of biases and fallacies, else our poor reasoning will lead us away from the truth and perhaps still to God.
Now, I'm not going to spend much time on this one because most atheists that I've come into contact with don't think this way. They wouldn't accept this type of proof. For example, the ontological argument is the most popular rationalist argument. It goes like this: God is the greatest conceivable being, omniscience, omnipotence, etc. Now, this maximally great being must also exist in reality rather than just our minds, because if it only exists in our minds, then it wouldn't really be a maximally great being. So then, God, the greatest conceivable being, must exist in reality.
So about those fallacies I just mentioned, the ontological argument steps in one most children know to avoid, called wish fulfillment. In no other situation would anyone accept imagining things into existence, but for some reason it trips people up when you try to apply it to some maximal conceivable thing. The reason it's so slippery is because it doesn't have a self-contradiction in it. If God really existed, then there is no obvious contradiction to the argument. The problem is that it only considers this hypothetical and is thus a hidden presuppositional argument. If it considered the possibility that God didn't exist, it would have to show that in this case no conscious agents could exist who were capable of conceiving of the concept of a maximally great being. Only if this could be shown does the ability to conceive of a maximum being's existence imply that such a being must actually exist. And besides, if the greatest conceivable being only exists in our minds but not reality, then it would be the greatest conceivable being. Concepts, things you conceive of, exist in the mind. So for the greatest conceivable thing to exist only in the mind is no contradiction to its definition. Messenger swapped greatest conceivable for maximally great, even though neither of us could know the mind of a maximally great being enough to conceive of it. Nor can we conceive of an omniscient being. We can conceive of the idea of an omniscient being, but we could not conceive of the being itself.
Basically, if you can think about God, then he must exist.
I don't know what else to say to this. If only conceiving of a maximally great bank account actually worked. If only conceiving of a maximally great house. Too bad it only works for conceiving of a maximally great being. The ontological argument is not a rational argument. It is a childish argument for people who don't want to give up their imaginations. The Bible tells you to have the heart and mind of a child for this reason, because it makes you easier to keep indoctrinated.
Let's move on to number 2. This is the most common type of proof that atheists want. It's empirical proof, scientific proof, observational data. Seeing is believing. If I don't see it, if I didn't see Jesus rise from the dead, then I have no reason to believe it.
All right, what data can we see?
A very common empiricist type proof is the cosmological argument. You see, we observe all of these causes and effects in the real world. We see all these effects, right? Let's go back to the cause. All effects have causes, therefore there must be an ultimate first cause, and that first cause we call God.
But if all effects have causes, and a first cause has no cause, why must there be a first cause? That sounds more like an exception to the rule. If all effects have causes, and all causes are themselves effects of some other cause, then there must be an infinite chain of causality. It's an unintuitive conclusion, sure, but it is the logical one. I think Messenger is really starting with the hidden presupposition that there must be a first cause. We don't see that cause in the present, which means it must be somewhere in the past. But if we don't presuppose it, then why must there be a first cause? Messenger never gives a reason. And why is God such a nebulous term? In the last argument, he was the greatest conceivable being. Now God is the first cause? Why must these be the same entity? How is the first cause omnipresent, for starters?
Recently, there was this controversy around Mary apparitions supposedly being better proof for Christianity than the Gospels, because there was all sorts of eyewitnesses who sensed this.
Neither of those were good proofs, because eyewitness testimony is inherently insufficient to demonstrate the supernatural. Humans are too prone to illusions and bias to base a belief in the supernatural on their claims. Messenger often says that using the Bible as his foundation is like building off a rock, and that we shouldn't rely on our own understandings. But the Gospels are the testimonies of what humans understood to have happened. If the Gospels are his best proof of the Bible, then he believes in the Bible because he believes in the Gospels, which he believes in because he believes the human understanding of what happened to Jesus. That ought to be a thorn in his side.
Also, everybody's experiences are different. Let's say there's two people in a car, one in the driver's seat and the other in the passenger seat. The one in the driver's seat looks down and sees a gas pedal and says, hey, there's a gas pedal. I have sensed with my eyes, with my foot, right? I put my foot on the gas pedal. There is a gas pedal. But what about the passenger? He doesn't see a gas pedal. He can't feel a gas pedal. He doesn't see, therefore he does not believe.
But the driver could just show the other guy the gas pedal. Or if that wasn't possible for whatever reason, he could just tell him that he can control when the car moves because he has a gas pedal and demonstrate the effect. The passenger can hear the driver talk about having access to a gas pedal, and he can feel the acceleration from being in a shared car with the guy who can push the gas pedal, so it would make a lot of sense for the passenger to believe in the gas pedal. If Messenger provided the analogous evidence that he and I can have shared access in, then I would believe in God. I bet he won't.
Also, just take two people growing up in the United States, growing up in the church. One Christian is going to say, hey, I've prayed to God all my life. I've seen him do wonderful things in my life, and this is why I believe, because he just keeps doing good things.
So, indoctrination and confirmation bias. What if the good things stop? Would that falsify God? What would Job have to say about that?
Someone who was raised in the church and then falls away from the faith is going to say, I kept praying, I kept reading the Bible, I kept going to church, doing Bible studies, and my dog got run over. I got cancer. My child died. There was a hurricane that blew my house away. I do not see God doing any good things in my life. Therefore, I don't believe in him anymore. They say, even if there is a God, he must be an evil God for bringing all these bad things into my life.
When I was about 10, I had a close friend named Wesley. He lived a few houses down and was a grade or two below me, but we played backyard football together. I remember one morning getting ready for school and going out to the bus stop, which was outside his house. But that morning, there was an ambulance out front, and the kids gathering for the bus wanted to know what had happened. Turns out, Wesley had died in his sleep. Apparently, he just stopped breathing. I'm sure I asked why God would allow such a thing, and to this day, I've never really had a problem with the answer. You can go watch my video on the problem of evil if you want a full breakdown. But in short, I think that God's omniscience does a lot of heavy lifting. He'd know the consequences of an action better than anyone, and even if I didn't understand what God's plan was, I could trust in it. This was also a God of all power who could wipe away any pain, heal any wound. Death wouldn't even be a big deal for him, so why should I worry about God's plan for Wesley, just because it was different for his plan for me? My lack of knowledge about God's plan wasn't enough to make me disbelieve in God. I'm telling you this because Messenger associates this response with any ex-Christian. He associates the problem of evil with me, even though he doesn't know who I am. I want to be very clear, should he ever see this video. I'm not that kind of atheist. I'm the straw man.
Now, the third way we can prove God's existence is using the pragmatic approach. You see, when people stick to the principles of Christ, loving your neighbor as yourself, going to church, there's this community of people loving each other, building each other up in love. Look at Western civilization, which is founded on a lot of Christian values. Just look at all the good that has come out of it. Essentially, Christianity works, therefore it's true. Good things are coming out of it, therefore we should believe in God.
I'm sorry, but no. That's just a fallacy. Useful does not equal being founded in truth, and besides, Christianity doesn't have a monopoly on producing good in this world. Of its three ways, I reject the pragmatic proof. It's a bad method that can make you believe in any useful lie.
Some might find the empiricist proofs good. Some might find the rationalist proofs good. But the thing is, all of these are subjective proofs. So the fact is that these three types of proofs, they can work sometimes. Some people can be convinced by them.
In theory, I think I'm willing to accept either rationalist or empiricist proofs, but I've yet to find one that wasn't riddled with fallacies.
Now, the fourth way of proving God's existence, which is really the only objective way to prove God's existence, because with the other proofs, it's just your word, your thoughts, your reasoning, your experiences versus the atheists, and so you're just going to go back and forth forever. But the only way to objectively prove God's existence is going to be using transcendental proof. Basically, the transcendental proof says this: without God, you would not be able to prove anything at all in an objective fashion.
Why must God be required in order to prove anything? This is just an empty assertion. At least it's on theme with all the other hidden presuppositions Messenger has.
You see, anytime an atheist asks me, hey, prove to me that the Bible is true, or provide evidence that God exists, they are presupposing that my God exists, that it is good to seek knowledge. Evidence is good, truth is good, and they're seeking that end in their own twisted way, of course. God must necessarily exist in order for us to even have this conversation right now.
Another empty assertion. It sounds a lot like Messenger is just presupposing that logic, reasoning, communication, or truth couldn't possibly exist without a God. But he completely fails to give any reason for why God is required for these things. That's an incredible irony given that Messenger agrees that evidence is good, yet he uses that very fact as so-called evidence that God exists without any justification.
If the atheist view of the universe were true, we evolved from a single-celled life form.
It's evolution, not atheism, but go on.
Our brains are just bags of chemicals. Your brain is reacting a certain way. My brain is reacting a certain way. All of our thoughts are just a result of chemical reactions. If that were true, how could we know that was true, given we are just reacting chemically?
The word just does a lot of heavy lifting here. We are bags of chemicals, but calling us just bags of chemicals implies some insufficiency, but I struggle to see what that is beyond Messenger's own incredulity. He doesn't seem to realize the complexities biochemistry can create, and instead just assumes that the concept can't be enough.
How could you know that your chemicals are reacting correctly?
If my chemicals were not reacting correctly, then I would not have a coherent conscious experience. I do have a coherent conscious experience, so my chemicals must be working correctly. It's modus tollens. But be wary, because by correctly I do not mean perfectly. Minds can do incredible things, but they are not impervious to bias or misunderstandings.
Even if we were just bags of chemicals reacting, we couldn't know that.
Again with the empty assertions. Systems of chemicals are entirely capable of containing information, and that same system could conceivably be able to utilize that information. Why bags of chemicals couldn't know things the way we do, Messenger doesn't back up whatsoever.
Why would a bag of chemicals that has survived only because it's the most fit in its environment want proof of a transcendent God? Isn't the goal here just to survive? Why don't you want just to survive? The fact is, humans don't live that way. We don't live just to survive.
I love how Messenger puts fitness in air quotes, as though fitness is some magical property that defines survival. He has the direction backwards. An organism is considered fit if it survives and reproduces. But also, an ability to tell truths from mere possibilities would be helpful for survival, I would think. It lets you perceive and avoid danger, find food or mates more easily, or engage more cohesively with your social group. So yes, the goal is to survive, which means that evolution is willing to do anything it stumbles on which increases that survival, including distinguishing truth. It can also make a species curious, if that curiosity can lead to more accurate truths. I think it is this curiosity which drives us to wonder about whether a God made us.
But if we can sum up the best proof for God's existence in one sentence, it's just like this. Without God, that is the triune God of the scriptures, knowledge itself becomes impossible and human experience becomes unintelligible. Without God, we could not prove anything at all.
With or without God, I can prove that I experience reality. That's evidenced by my own existence, which I can be certain of regardless of what other truths I can know. This single counterexample is enough to show that Messenger's claim is false. I shouldn't even have to give this example though, because once again it's just an empty claim about how impossible everything is without God. No justification given whatsoever. Of course, Messenger knows this, so he gives one last Hail Mary argument.
Now this is a pragmatic proof. Hey, atheist, if you don't want to die, believe in Jesus. You're going to live forever. I mean, even on your own worldview, you're going to die. What's better for you, right, is that you're going to live forever. Life is a good thing. And it's obvious you believe this because you're still alive right now.
If you want something pragmatic, I'm willing to bet that any God out there who is truly just will judge us for our actions, not our faiths. Live a kind life, whether you believe in God or not. One thing I agree with Messenger on is that life is good, and if there is no afterlife, no God, then living life kindly will still have a positive impact on those you leave behind. Either way, you do good for life. So maybe don't worry so much about which God you accept in your heart, and worry more about being a good neighbor. There is one pragmatic thing I'd recommend, something which is more than likely to expand your mind and make you a more well-rounded person. Go read a fucking book.